The governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses and Tony Morris, along with 75 other members of the Jehovah's Witnesses, have just been indicted to testify in a landmark case about CSA in Bethel. What does this mean for the Jehovah's Witness religion? Will the courts actually get the whole governing body to testify under oath about their CSA issues? And how can this change the way that the United States deals with this cult? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's begin. There is a lawsuit in New York that I've been meaning to talk about for a while now, and it just became so big that I literally had to stop the video I was making to talk about this. This religion has a huge CSA issue inside its ranks, not just because of some bad apples that infiltrate this religion, but because of how this religion behaves when it hears about these bad apples. Instead of urging members to report these horrible crimes, this religion has a culture of not reporting anything to the authorities to not make the religion look bad or to avoid besmirching Jehovah's name. It's such a problem that when the Australian Royal Commission looked into the religion, out of 1,500 recorded cases of CSA since the 70s in Australia alone, not even one had been reported to the police. That investigation was notable, not just because it showed us those cases, proving us that the CSA issues in this religion are proportionally larger than those of the Catholic churches, but because it compelled one governing body member, Jeffrey Jackson, to testify under oath. That single video of Jeffrey Jackson testifying, lying under oath, being dismissive and evasive, and overall a lying coward, has woken up more people than any video any apostate has ever made. That brings us to this case in New York, because it could be even bigger than the Australian Royal Commission. This lawsuit was filed in February 2025, detailing the horrible experience of a victim of CSA perpetrated in the early 90s by an influential Jehovah's Witness multiple times inside Bethel. Then, the lawsuit alleges that these crimes were hidden as part of a cover-up done by the religion itself. This whole thing happened because the accused, who was then a ministerial servant, was given access to the then minor at the world's headquarters of the Jehovah's Witnesses, which was fully greenlit by the elders of the congregation. The lawsuit is against Watchtower for negligence, since they failed to get a background check on the ministerial servant before allowing him to be alone multiple times with the minor. Instead, the lawsuit accuses the religion of placing a known predator in a position of power. It also accuses the religion of failing to properly educate or warn members about the signs of CSA, something anyone who has been inside the religion knows a bit too well. And it blames the religion for the trauma from both the CSA and how the religion handled it. This is obviously a huge case, not just because speaking out against this cult is extremely hard and brave and very few people are in a position where they can do it, but because of the details of the case. The ministerial servant was a known predator, and he was okayed personally by multiple elders and everyone else who takes the lead in this religion to be alone with this minor multiple times, even after there were telltale signs that something was wrong. And to make things worse, the victim, as it typically happens in this cult, was pressured to be silent by the religion, further showing how it covers up CSA. And the CSA happened inside Bethel. This makes it unique and extremely problematic for the religion, because in any other case, the religion can just pretend this happened because of a few bad apples and that the leadership had nothing to do with it, because sometimes some Jehovah's Witnesses don't listen to the leadership or do what their religion tells them to do. But in this case, they cannot say that anymore. This didn't happen in a congregation in the middle of nowhere or in someone's car while they were preaching, which, horrible as it is, gives the religion the chance to distance itself from the crimes. No, this happened right in the heart of the religion, the world's headquarters. It happened right under the governing body's roof. They can't weasel their way out of pretending that this is an isolated event anymore. That's one of the main reasons why this case is so important, because it proves that this religion protects predators organizationally in and out of Bethel. This isn't an issue of some isolated congregation somewhere. This is an issue of the religion itself. And that is why the governing body, the leaders of this cult, have finally been summoned to testify under oath. Let's take a look at the lawsuit. We can start with this summon that says the governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses, Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of New York, Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, and John and Jane Doe's 1 to 75, whose identities are presently unknown to plaintiff in their official and individual capacities. To the above named defendants, you are hereby summoned to answer the complaint in this action and to serve a copy of your answer. If the complaint is not served with the summons, to serve a notice of appearance on the plaintiff's attorney within 20 days after service of this summons, exclusive of the date of service, or within 30 days after the service is complete if the summons is not personally delivered to you within the state of New York, and in case of your failure to appeal or answer, judgment will be taken against you by default for the relief demanded in the complaint. You can find a little bit more about the summons in this other little document over here. To the above named defendants, Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of New York, the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, Middleport Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, please take notice that you are hereby summoned to answer the complaint, a copy of which is hereby upon to you, and to serve a copy of your answer to the complaint upon the undersigned attorneys listed below within 20 days after the service of this summons. This is a document that is basically telling that the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, the governing body, and the people of the Middleport Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses are all summoned to testify under oath. We can see here the allegations, which I'm not going to read because they're already horrifying enough. And in the parties, we can see the defendants. The defendants are basically three. The number one is Defendant Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of New York, which is basically the non-for-profit religious corporation organizing and existing under and by virtue of the laws of the state of New York. This is basically the religion. Because remember, the CSA happened inside of the headquarters of the religion. Back then, the religion also finalized appointments of ministerial servants, which makes them liable on these kinds of things. This is exactly why they don't do this anymore. Because before, they were like, oh no, we send the thing to Bethel so the governing body can pray over it and whatever, and then we get back word over whether or not they became ministerial servants or elders or whatever. They don't do that anymore for liability. They changed it so the circuit overseer is the one who does it. However, this happened in the 90s. So the Watchtower, the religion, did that still. The second defendant is the Middleport Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, obviously because all of this happened within the approval of the elders. And the third defendant is the governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And it lists why they are here. Because governing body's roles in approving appointments of ministerial servants, supervision of warning and the person who is accused, and formulation of Jehovah's Witnesses policy all occurred at governing body's King County headquarters at the time of the CSA alleged in this complaint. A substantial portion of the acts and or omissions giving rise to the governing body's liability occurred in Kings County. So they're basically saying the governing body is the one that does everything, is the one that deals with everything, is the one that puts the rules, is the one that places the ministerial servants there, which is why they need to testify. It goes on to say the governing body is comprised of 8 members, and governing body claims to have a formal president or secretary, which is no longer accurate. And then it lists the current members of the governing body, and it lists their names. They are Kenneth E. Cook Jr., Samuel Frederick Hurd, Jeffrey William Jackson, Mark Stephen Lett, Garrett Losh, Anthony Morris III, Mark Sanderson, and David H. Splain. Why? Because they were all members of the governing body as of May 18th, 2021, including Anthony Morris. So since this was issued on May 18, 2021, Anthony Morris is still being summoned, even though Anthony Morris is no longer part of the governing body. We have some factual allegations of how the hierarchy of the Jehovah's Witnesses work, how the authority flows downward from the governing body, down to the circuits, down to the congregations, down to the elders, all of that stuff. Mentions how the elders are the highest authority at the congregational level, and stuff like that, that we all know as Jehovah's Witnesses or ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, but that perfectly paint a picture to someone who is not aware of how Jehovah's Witnesses work, and to know why the fact that the elders okayed this was so huge because the elders are the highest authority of the whole congregation. All of this stuff is basically the context that you need to know to become aware of how CSA would work inside of this religion. Then we get to the specific allegations, which I already summarized in the least horrifying way that I was capable of. And then the counts that they are accused of. They're accused on the count of negligence, on the count of negligent training and supervision of employees, on the count of negligent retention of employees, given that, predators don't get exposed and sent to the police and instead just get moved to a different congregation at best, and on the count of gross negligence and reckless indifference to the rights of plaintiff. This is not just because the rights of the plaintiff was to be protected as a minor, but also because the elders try to silence the plaintiff and further traumatize the plaintiff. That is the lawsuit right now in this religion that I bet it has the governing body on a huge headache. However, don't think that this means that the governing body are automatically going to testify. I know that this is a summon for the whole governing body, including Tony Morris and another 75 people. And while I think that the 75 people may testify, I really think that the religion is going to try its absolute best so the governing body does not testify. They will fight tooth and nail to avoid it, not just because of how it would look like, not just because the governing body would have to pretty much either expose the cult or lie under oath, but because it establishes precedent. Any other lawsuit that is kind of like this about CSA inside this religion may actually want to summon the governing body based on this. And that is something that the religion cannot afford to have, because then they will never be out of someone's court testifying and of all of this stuff. So what has to happen in order for the governing body to testify actually? Well, unfortunately, it is a little bit harder than it may seem to. Now, I don't know that much about law, but fortunately, avoidjw.org just made an article about this and asks that question: what needs to happen for the governing body to testify? Please go watch this article. This article is going to be updated, as far as I know, with all of the information, as soon as there is more information. So if you want to stay updated, go to avoidjw.org. I always love to recommend these guys because they do really good work. And this is what Ms. Usato says about what has to happen for the governing body to testify. There is a real possibility that members of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses could be compelled to testify, but it depends on several legal and procedural factors. One, naming the governing body as defendants directly holds them personally and institutionally accountable for the policies and failures cited in the lawsuit. Two, relevance of their knowledge or actions. If the plaintiff legal can demonstrate that the governing body is or was directly involved in decisions that harm the plaintiff, then the court could rule that their testimony is material and necessary. Also, if they knew about the risk of abusing created or enforced the policies that allegedly led to it, like the two-witness rules or secrecy policies, or were directly involved in decisions that harm the plaintiff. Now, I think this is a little bit tricky. We know that this is the case, but demonstrating it is going to be an uphill battle. Obviously, they do everything so the governing body doesn't have any responsibility. They have fall guys, they have people who are supposed to be the people who take responsibility for all of this stuff. So this may be harder than it sounds. Discovery and deposition. Before the trial, both sides can request documents and question witnesses under oath. If the plaintiff's attorneys request depositions of governing body members and the defendants object, it will likely lead to a legal fight over whether those individuals must comply. Courts have sometimes protected high-level executives or leaders under the Apex Doctrine, claiming they are too high-ranking unless uniquely knowledgeable, but that protection is not automatic. This is what I'm telling you about. They may be like, no, these guys are too high ranking, and the Jehovah's Witnesses will fight tooth and nail. Or suppose the case goes to trial. If it does, instead of settling, and if the governing body actions or knowledge are central to the plaintiff's claim, their testimony could be requested in person or via deposition recordings. The court could issue subpoenas if necessary. 5. Judge Cross signing off on that motion. If he orders testimony from a governing body member, It would set a huge precedent, and Watchtower would likely fight it hard, possibly even filing appeals. The Jehovah's Witness religion does not want the governing body to testify, and they will fight tooth and nail. So yes, the governing body have been indicted. They have been summoned. They have been summoned to testify under oath because of CSA that happened inside their religion. Not just their religion, but under their own roof. That being said, we don't know yet if that means that the governing body is actually going to testify. If the governing body testifies, it will only be because Zalkin Law LLP has done an amazing job at showing that the governing body needs to testify. I think it is a long shot. I don't want to rain on anyone's parade. It's just I want to be realistic. And I know that the one thing that the Jehovah's Witnesses do not want as a religion is to allow the governing body to testify, especially after the disastrous time that Jeffrey Jackson had in Australia. And remember, that wasn't even about like a specific case of like CSA. There wasn't even a lawsuit or whatever. It was just about the government trying to make sure that their religion had like adequate rules to protect the minors and all of that stuff. It wasn't this. It wasn't a lawsuit. We'll continue to update you in this channel, so don't forget to like and subscribe. This is definitely a huge lawsuit. I don't know what's gonna happen, but I definitely cannot wait to find out, and I will let you know of anything that happens as soon as I have wind of it. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and support me on Patreon. Do you want to support me on Patreon?